Released in 2019, Control is a delightfully weird game. Chief among its delights is the game's setting. The whole game takes place in a single building, called the Oldest House. It is a dangerous and otherworldly place wearing the sheep's clothes of an office building. Inside the Oldest House, you'll find mind-bending anomalies, eerie structures not made by human hands, and vast spaces that defy the size of the building's exterior. And alongside all this strangeness, you'll also find people. More specifically, you'll find employees. They all work for the Federal Bureau of Control, a fictional US government agency that investigates paranormal activity. For the FBC, confidentiality is of the highest importance. Everything they do and everything they learn about the paranormal world, they keep secret, to deal with and investigate as they see fit. The developers of the game made sure that the visual language of the building reflects this secrecy. There are security checkpoints in many departments. Almost every door requires a certain level of clearance to unlock. Security cameras are abundant. And information is highly compartmentalized so that no single employee has enough intel to entirely understand the Bureau's motives or methods. And what they do know, they are not permitted to speak of outside the building, or even to other employees outside of their clearance level. This obsession with secrecy is shared by the building itself. The Oldest House is a massive concrete building that sits in the middle of New York City, but cannot be seen or perceived unless it wants you to find it. The Federal Bureau of Control is modeled after real US government agencies, particularly the FBI and the CIA, agencies that deal with classified information and matters of national security, and so are famous for their secrecy. But you don't have to look as high up as that to find real-world inspirations for the FBC and the Oldest House. The video game industry that this game came out of comes to my mind. For an industry built around entertainment, the video game industry is surprisingly secretive. It is more secretive than any other entertainment industry. The games that studios work on are kept secret. The management structure of the studios are kept secret. The budget and profit of specific games are kept secret. It would be quicker to list the things that are not secret. The information from game companies is kept so controlled, you'd think they were keeping secrets of national security rather than making video games played for enjoyment. And the most common tool that they use to achieve this secrecy is called a non-disclosure agreement. You might have heard of a non-disclosure agreement, or an NDA for short. You might have even signed one at some point in your life, maybe multiple. Many companies in many industries use them. The basic idea of an NDA is that an employer wants to hire employees to do work. But in order to do that work, the employee must have access to sensitive information. Information that, if known to outsiders, could be damaging to the company. So what the employer does is have the employee sign a written agreement before they start working. This agreement to not disclose sensitive company information is legally enforced, with a threat of lawsuit or fines or both. And as long as the agreement is found by a court of law to be reasonable, a court of law will enforce it. The kind of information that the NDA might protect includes things like secret recipes, technology, unannounced projects, financial information, and basically anything else that the employer considers to be a company secret. There are some things that are reasonable to prohibit an employee from talking about, but NDAs can easily slip into unreasonable territory. Employees in the video game industry often can't talk about the management structure of the studio. They might not be able to talk about their pay or their benefits. Sometimes employees can't confirm that they're working on a game, even after it's been announced. The NDAs of the game industry are broad enough that employees tend to speak seldom or not at all about any of their work unless explicitly given permission, for fear of breaching some obscure part of their agreement. It's why game developers rarely agree to interviews, and when they are interviewed, they might have a producer from the studio with them to ensure they say nothing out of bounds. As a video game enthusiast who likes to learn about game development, I find this level of secrecy frustrating. More than that, though, it strikes me as odd that your employer can control what you talk about, particularly outside of work hours. NDAs can have a time limit, but they can also be indefinite, meaning you might not be able to talk about a game you worked on to anybody forever, even long after you stop working at the company, even if the game was canceled. Forgetting company secrets, your employer can control any speech. How much you talk to your coworkers will depend on how much socializing your employer allows. These are standard practices in the industry, but they set alarm bells off in my head. The game Death Stranding has a more extreme depiction of employer control. It starts with a pair of handcuffs that the main character, Sam, is mandated to wear by the organization, and that the organization insists are worn for his own good.
I would advise against that. I'm no expert, but I can assure you it's for your own protection. See?
So I'm a prisoner.
These aren't handcuffs. They're cutting-edge devices that keep us all connected.
Bridges, your employer in the game, takes urine and blood and stool samples from Sam at their discretion. His living quarters are mandated and surveilled by Bridges too. They can do this because Sam entered a contract in which he unknowingly signed away many of his personal freedoms. It's important to note that Sam delivers packages. And so, of course, when we look at infamously controlling corporations like Amazon, a package delivery company, this depiction is actually not so extreme. Besides Amazon, I'm sure you have worked at one or more employers who exercise what I would call extreme control over your body. Your job can tell you when you are allowed to go to the bathroom and for how long. They tell you when you can eat and for how long. That is, if they give you lunch breaks at all. They tell you when to arrive, where to sit, if you're allowed to sit, and when you can leave. This obsessive control over our bodies was considered normal in primary school when we were children, but somehow it becomes normal again in our adult working lives. Because we as the employee choose to accept the job, and by doing so, sign away many of our elementary human rights. But it's not a true choice, is it, when the alternative is poverty? Hold on, you might say. The employee is being paid though, so it is a fair trade. Maybe they're being paid. I've done more than my fair share of unpaid work. They call them unpaid internships in America. You don't get paid a cent, and yet are still subject to all that employer control, on top of providing valuable labor to the organization. Okay, but maybe you are paid. You would be paid then for your labor, not your obedience. And they choose how much you get paid. The pay does not have to be proportional to the value you provide the company. Generally, the amount you get paid is far below the amount of value you give in labor. You have no say on the company pay structure or pay policies, so you get underpaid for your work and then are expected to also give your obedience on top of that. But even if you are not underpaid, I still don't think any salary can justify the forfeiture of personal freedoms, especially since the employer can rip away that salary for almost any reason. It's called at-will employment. The company keeps you employed at their will, and if their will changes, they can terminate your employment. As an employee, then, you are put under daily threat of financial ruin. The money they pay you is a lever of control. This was directly the case with many coal mining towns in the 1900s, where the coal company would pay the miners not in dollars, but in coal scrip. This was paper or token currency issued by the coal company that could only be used in company stores, that is, stores that the coal company owned. So these miners, who were already suffering deplorable working conditions, were being paid in money that would go right back to the coal company. This effectively made the labor free for the coal company, and completely controlled where the miners could buy their goods. During this time, Britain had a similar practice, where employers would pay their workers in groceries instead of money. In the US, this system was officially outlawed in 1967. But it's not far from the reality we still have today, only with national currency instead of coal scrip. Because your employer controls your salary, so they also still control your purchases. The quantity and quality of food, shelter, medicine, and entertainment that you have is a direct result of that which you can afford. So if you want different or more or better things, ultimately your employer makes the decision of whether you can have them, not you. That money has leverage on you, ensuring that you abide by the employer's whims, or else lose that money and suffer poverty. And as a result, the employer also has leverage over your time. When you get up in the morning to get ready for work, when you commute to work, when you stay late at work, when you commute through traffic to get home after work, when you start getting ready for an early bedtime to wake up early and get ready for work again, your employer is dictating the contents of the hours of your life when you're not even on the clock. We build our lives around the work schedule, and it limits how often and for how long we can do things like traveling, seeing friends and family, and having time to ourselves. Things that make life worth living. We do this because without that paycheck, we lose everything. But it's not always just the threat of poverty that keeps us at work, is it? Sometimes it's also our passion. In Control, the employees of the FBC are here because they have a drive to learn about the unknown. They tolerate the dangerous working conditions and violations of freedom because the oldest house is a place where they can use their talents and feed their curiosity. In real life, we typically count ourselves lucky when our work is also our passion. But in these cases, that passion is taken advantage of by our employer and becomes yet another lever of control. On one end, people go in eager and vibrant, and come out the other end resentful and burnt out. Authoritarianism is often depicted as a massive empire with military occupations and heartless soldiers committing overt violence. And that does actually happen, of course. But it's also important not to forget this other kind of authoritarianism. The subtle kind that eats up the agency you have over your life in so many little ways. The levers of control accumulate until you have slowly surrendered the path of your life, maybe without realizing what you have lost, feeling deeply that something is very wrong, but not having the time, money, or energy to do anything about it. Some of these issues can be helped by labor unions, and if you have the opportunity to join one, you should probably do so. But union membership has never been all that high in the US, and has only been declining. And I don't think conversations about work-life balance are helpful either. Work-life balance cannot exist, because in our current system, work is antithetical to life. But hold on, you might say. We can't give employees more freedom over their lives. They would abuse it. They would take overly long bathroom breaks and not get enough work done. Well, if you think that long bathroom breaks are a bigger problem than the erosion of human rights, then I say, you would make a great CEO. Altogether, the employer controls most of your waking time. They control your body, your speech, and your money. In this way, the majority of our lives end up being lived under authoritarian rule. Even if you live in a democratic country with democratic institutions, and that's a big if, how much does it matter that you can vote for president when your actual daily life is lived under a dictatorship of employment? True freedom requires both institutional freedom and personal freedom. The US, for example, famously prides itself on having both, while actually having neither. It interests me that when I'm playing Control, the oppressive atmosphere all throughout the building should be depressing. But it works as the opposite for me, because through the oldest house, the developers of the game show themselves to be kindred. They show an understanding of the oppressive nature of the workplace. The oldest house pretends to be an office building, and capitalist democracies pretend to be free societies. It's also a cathartic experience to play the game, because you can see rooms like this and do what I've often wanted to do to them. Look, obviously we can't destroy the cubicles and handcuffs of our workplaces in real life, but I think maybe that we should all want to.